Hello friends, today I have a super special video for you. Of Crafts and Curios and I have slowly been adding to a little cottagecore community, and we decided to do a collab inspired by the seasons. I live in the northern hemisphere, so for me it's spring, but Of Crafts and Curios lives in the southern hemisphere, so she's doing an autumn doll. Her doll is completely adorable. Make sure to go and check out her collab vid. Her whole channel has an amazing aesthetic and she's super talented. She's such a sweetheart as well. If you enjoyed the vid, then please give me a like and consider subscribing. It really helps me out in the algorithm. Hit the notification bell if you want to, because I do not have a regular upload schedule. I kind of have a sponsor today. It's me! I wrote a book. I don't know. It's available on Amazon. Links are down below. I'm joking, I don't think this counts as a sponsor. I've wanted to make a rabbit doll for ages and spring feels like the perfect time to do it. I'll explain some of my inspiration a little later in the video. While I was planning the doll, I first wanted to give her cute human feet, but then I realised if she's in the same universe as my fawn, then she needs to have animal legs. I was talking to Daffodils and asking for advice about digitigrade legs, but Steph told me that actually rabbits are plantigrade, meaning their whole foot touches the floor, kind of like humans, and I think I described my fawn as digitigrade, and she isn't either. Animals like goats and horses are actually ungulagrade, meaning like walking on their hooves. Digitigrade means like walking on their toes, like cats and dogs, so I did a learn. I was hoping to be able to use Delightful's ears and feet for this doll, but when I tried them, it just didn't work, so I ended up sculpting them myself. Billions of to-do lists. I haven't done dolls for so long. The 3D modelling software that I use is Blender, and I did quite a lot of learning on this project. It's important to me that the ankle be articulated. I started modelling and printing so that I could make more joints for my dolls. I had some issues with the resin and the last time I made joints, so I used ABS like. The ankle and foot are in 3 pieces to make sure that it is properly articulated. I decided to use Jane Boolittle literally because she was like sat next to me and I couldn't decide on a different doll. Her face is already bare, but I still need to take off her hair. I'm using my clipper like usual. These tags in their heads do my head in, I hate it so much. Using my hairdryer, I'm heating the head until it's noticeably squishy. It takes about a minute to do, and then I'm carefully pulling her head off, trying my best not to break the neck peg. I use a screwdriver to scrape the inside of the head. Then using needle nose pliers, I'm taking everything that's inside of the head outside of the head. It was just hair this time, no glue at all, it was great. Using a cotton pad and a tiny bottle of acetone this time, I'm removing her scalp paint and giving her face another once over. I've never worked with this sculpt before. I think I only have this one Jane Boolittle. I'm marking around where I'm going to put the ears on the head so that I know where to plug the hair. I'm doing a partial reroot again today. I used the pull method to pull this yarn apart and get these hair fibres. I'm giving her a fringe, so I'm marking where the parting for that will be as well. I'm thickly rooting where I'm adding the fringe and around where the ears will be. And then once that's done, I'm adding some glue and waiting for that to dry and then covering the hair, ready for spraying. Because this doll includes mods, we're going to be bouncing back and forth a little bit, so now onto the body. I need to cut her legs in order to add these calf pieces, and to find out where to cut them, I'm using my calipers to find the size of the top of the printed piece, and then I can find the corresponding part of the plastic leg. Then using a hobby saw and a miter box, I'm cutting her legs. I find this much easier to get an accurate cut than with a Dremel. A Dremel melts the plastic rather than actually cutting it. The Dremel discs are pretty small and the miter box gives me the guide. Be careful with your fingers. I drilled holes in the bottom of the legs and in the top of the resin pieces. Using a 2-part epoxy glue, I added wires to the top part of the legs. I put some glue in the holes of the resin pieces, dunked the resin pieces in the epoxy and then glued those on. And I left it to cure overnight. Once that was dry, I sanded the resin and plastic pieces to blend them, and then sanded the rest of her body using my pen sander. So onto the colour change. I'm using my spray booth, and I'm wearing a mask that is for spray painting, and I'm wearing gloves. So the body gets a base coat of Army Painted Primer in white, but the hands and the forearms and the head don't do well with it. It like never fully dries. So whatever you put on top takes like fingerprints and stuff. So the rest, they're just getting airbrushed in white straight away. They're having a couple more coats. At this point, the body's only primed, not painted, because white dolls are a nightmare. She ends up getting pretty grubby through this process while I'm furring and flocking her, but I'll do the airbrushing later. So for the furring and flocking, I'm using commercial, flock and viscose. First, I'm painting the inside of the ears with a pale pink and adding a little bit of a darker pink at the bottom. Everything to be flocked and furred is getting painted with white acrylic paint. This was my first time flocking with commercial flocking, and I found the best way to do it was add the PVA glue, use something to scoop up the fuzz, and then tap your hand to tap the piece off rather than tapping the piece. I'm also wearing my respirator because this stuff was everywhere. I stopped using my fingers. I was picking it up with my fingers, but it'd get completely stuck to my hands, and then I'd wipe it on myself, and so there was just more flocking everywhere. Feet, the ears and the lower legs are getting 2 coats of flocking. This is the colour Snow from Viscose Heaven. I'm adding a little bit of fur below her knees on like the shin side and the calf side to kind of bulk them up. The same way when I do hair with PVA glue, I'm giving it a blast with a hairdryer in between layers. I didn't want to use hot glue because that does add more bulk than I wanted to. I'm adding a little bit of fur to the top of the foot near the toes because I noticed this is kind of what rabbits have. I'm trimming the shin, calf and foot fur now. And then where that glue is that attaches the fur to the legs, I'm adding more flocking on top to make it blend. This time I'm really packing it down and trying not to shake off too much. I did the same around the knees, but trying to keep it quite thin so it doesn't get any in the way of any movement. It did a bit, but to be expected really, I guess. Now I'm furring all the way from the knees to the hips. Around the hips, to avoid getting in the way of movement, again I'm stopping the wefts a little bit away from the hip joint, and then I'm flocking, but making sure that I'm not flocking in the moving part of the joint. I decided to trim all of this fur in one go so that I could kind of sculpt the shape of the thigh a little bit better, because rabbits have quite chunky thighs, but I didn't want to increase the bulk in a different way. I wanted it to just be with fur. And then I'm furring up again. I'm doing some flocking just above the hip joint as well, and then I do a few rounds of regular fur as well. I drilled a hole for the tail here, but it ended up in the wrong place, so ignore that hole. On to making her tail. If I'd had some white yarn, I would have just made a regular pom-pom, but I didn't. So I used some super skinny wire, added some of the viscose, twisted the wire around it, and then repeated that 3 or 4 times. So I made 2 with 3 poofs and 2 with 4 poofs. Where the viscose and the wire met, I added a little bit of glue to make sure that the viscose wouldn't slide out. I wrapped these floofy poofers around themselves and each other, and then cut all the fur into the shape that I wanted. I twisted the wires together and trimmed them, added a new hole, and then glued in the tail with 2-part epoxy glue. Onto the face up. I moved recently and I couldn't find my usual pencils, so I decided to try the Arteza pencils I got recently. I haven't done a face up for a while, like a really long time either, and I found the whole thing pretty challenging. I had to look back at like old face ups to remember what I used to do. I'll talk a bit more about the pencils in a minute. I want to talk about the doll's inspiration. So of course I'm thinking about cottagecore generally, but the initial bunny doll that I had the idea for was going to be wearing Victorian underwear, like combinations and a corset. I wanted to do the bunny for the spring doll. It happened to coincide with Easter, which is kind of lucky, but also kind of a month and a half late on my part. Oops. It was supposed to be in at the end of March, where I just had so much going on. Because my bunny was going to be underwear inspired, that made me think of a chemise à la reine, which is like kind of underwear inspired but 18th century. So it's the dress, I think it was popularized by Marie Antoinette, but she wore it very scandalously on a portrait, and it was, yeah, it caused a mega stir because it was like seeing the queen in her underpants or something apparently. And also Marie Antoinette had like the Queen's Hamlet right in Versailles. She had all these cottages, so Marie Antoinette's pretty cottagecore. Chemise à la reine are usually white, and I was planning to do this white, but then I realised it would be too much white. It's already so much white, and I love a split complementary colour scheme, so her hair's going to be blue. That means I'm going to use oranges and yellows. I was also going to do stays, a bit like the fawn, but decided against that because I do want them to look like they're in the same universe, but I don't want them to look like they're wearing the same thing. So I went with a ribbon. I'll show you a bit later. Another inspiration for this doll was Rowan Ellis. If you haven't watched Rowan Ellis's content, you're missing out. She's amazing. She's a queer YouTuber. She does a lot on film, which is so interesting. She's so clever, and she did an amazing video about cottagecore being gay. Also, she has blue hair and a full fringe, so that's why my rabbit doll's got blue hair and a full fringe. Because she's inspired by Rowan Ellis to a point, like I don't know if I should then, in homage to Rowan, make her asexual as well, because obviously everybody in this forest is a bit gay in some way. In terms of the pencils, I was kind of disappointed, but I think my hopes were pretty high. I have a couple of friends who use Arteza pencils and they create absolutely incredible dolls, so I thought it would be as easy as using the professional quality pencils that I usually use, but of course it wasn't. It's not a fair comparison at all. They are much more similar to the Magic Fly pencils, and with Magic Fly I didn't have very high expectations going in and knew that I was going to have to work quite hard with them. Same with these, you do have to work quite hard with them. The bright colours had incredible payoff, no complaints there whatsoever. The greys I had issues with. I think also I'm comparing this with the Magic Fly pencils in that I didn't have to do many layers with those, but with this doll I'm pretty sure I did between 12 and 14, which is quite high even for me. I do a lot of layers. Some of those were fixing issues, to be fair. But also I was working on a natural skin tone doll, and then this one's unnatural. And an airbrush colour change does change the texture of the face as well, which isn't a fair comparison. I'm really out of practice, so that's not a fair comparison. I found that they were pretty hard, like they crumbled quite easily. They wouldn't hold a point very well. They'd sharpen to a nice point, but then you lose the point instantly. And something like Caran d'Ache is much more creamy, but then Caran d'Ache is £4 a pencil, so that's really not a fair comparison. There aren't a huge number of natural skin tone colours either. The price is good for the number of colours that you're getting. So Magic Fly is £18 for 72, Arteza is £28 for 72. I'm not sure how worth Arteza is over Magic Flow. I recently had somebody ask me to list the products that I use in my videos, so I'm going to start trying to do that in the description box. They also mentioned that it'd be useful for beginners. If you are an absolute beginner, I have a course over on Creative Fabrica. They gave me a link that you can follow, then that will track where the traffic's coming from. It is an affiliate link. You can just check out the intros to my classes if you want to and kind of get a feel for what I made. Rather than with YouTube, which is kind of a work along with me, these are actual tutorials. I put a lot of work into them and I am really proud of them. The class on face-ups includes quite a detailed explanation of how to use Mr. Super Clear, some of its finicky points and safety. I think a lot of people are scared of Mr. Super Clear, which stops them getting into the doll world. So I'm hoping at least this part of the video will give people more confidence using the product and how to remain safe while using it. If you use that affiliate link, I do earn a commission, which really helps me continue to work on dolls. Dolls is expensive anyway. YouTube is also pretty expensive, the equipment that you need to be able to do it, and there are always continuing costs. I desperately need a new computer. While I've been trying to do this voiceover, my computer crashed 4 times in about half an hour. Eyebrows have been my holy grail forever, and I feel like with this doll, I did eyebrows that I'm proud of. I'm not sure if this is how I want all of my eyebrows to be, but I am very happy with how they turned out. And they'll be covered with a fringe anyway. Spring in the UK and Japan are so different. Like, spring in Japan is all about cherry blossoms and that's kind of it. And spring is really short. Like, it goes from icy cold to roasty toasty hot within a month, or like usually about 2 weeks. But the UK, I think we have quite a long spring. I love the smell of the air. Like, morning spring air is so beautiful. And then some of my favourite flowers are crocuses, and crocuses are just everywhere in the UK. And then also daffodils everywhere. It's so beautiful and happy. And I think I saw daffodils once in Japan. I never saw a crocus. Too sad. I was thinking about doing crocuses on this doll actually, like with the split complementary, doing blue and purple with yellow, but then decided just blue and then the opposite way round. The face up, I considered making her very rabbit-like by giving her kind of a black nose, but I decided to kind of hit the middle ground and really blush her mouth and her nose, which I think gives more of a rabbity suggestion rather than overtly rabbit. You can see me in the video adding more detail to her nose and then taking it back again, and I like just that red on the tip of her nose. Also with rabbits, I always think of their teeth, so I wanted to show her teeth in this face up as well. I just did that with a little bit of a suggestion of an open mouth. I drew a line on her top lip and then just added 2 little strokes of white gouache. This is the Arteza gouache. I love their gouache. I said that I didn't like the greys with these pencils, but to be honest, the fact that they're not too pigmented was really helpful for the way that I shade. And she did come out really lovely. She just took a bit more work than I had expected. When I added her eyelashes the first time, I really didn't like how they turned out. I did them how I always do them, first pencil and then gouache, but I didn't get as thin a line as I wanted to, and they just looked kind of spidery and floofy, which is not what I wanted for this doll. So I took them off with a Q-tip, but apparently I hadn't been sealing properly. Make sure that you really do seal the face properly. And it took off some of her blushing, so rather than taking her whole face up off, because I am happy with the rest of it and I don't want to airbrush colour change again, I'm patching that up with a bit more pan pastel, and I think it worked pretty well. Pan pastels are super pigmented and blendable, but also super expensive. I lost footage of adding the final eyelashes, I'm afraid. But as with the first eyelashes, just pencil and then gouache on top and trying my best to get a really thin line with that. I've been enjoying doing catch lights like this. I do like line dash line kind of thing, and I think it makes the eyes look super shimmery. I added more gouache to her scleras around her iris and a little bit on her waterline as well for a shimmer. I darkened her pupil area as well. I added hair to the rest of her head. I'm not wefting. I found that it's not really necessary and I don't like doing it. So what I do is take some of the hair, cut the top so it's flat, and then just glue it on in the way that I would make a weft. So glue underneath and glue on top. Because I'm using PVA glue, I'm giving that a blast with the hairdryer so that it's dry to the touch, and then I can keep going and add more hair on top rather than having to wait for it to dry. And then once that was completely dry, I started cutting her hair. I sectioned it with these clippy things there for sewing and used dressmaking scissors, sectioning it to cut as I was going along. I wasn't really sure how the hairstyle needed to be with the ears because there's quite a lot of hair between the ears, so halfway through added the ears so I could get a better feel for the overall look, and then continued to cut her hair. I added some short layers around kind of like eye level all the way around the haircut because I just love a shag cut at the moment. I made the dress using peach chiffon. The pattern and instructions are going to be available on my Patreon, links down in the description box. Most of the back of this dress is open. I'll explain why when I put her together. For the ribbon, I'm using this wide pale blue ribbon. I'm going to be folding it in half around her waist, and I decided to add some daffodils with embroidery because they fit the colour scheme perfectly. I'm using a lazy daisy stitch and French knots to make those. Then I used a dark green to add kind of like stems, and then used a pale sage green to add kind of suggestions of leaves. And then folded that over and sewed it to itself. I realised that she needed something to tie everything together, and that was just a little daffodil in her hair, so I'm using acrylic powder and liquid, exactly the same thing that is used to do nail extensions, to make a daffodil. I wandered straight out of frame, but here's the final thing. To put the feet together, I put the kind of lollipop piece into the top of the foot and then put a piece of steel wire, this is only thin steel wire, through the hole that is in the foot piece, and then used some UV resin and cured that. Then I'm adding 2-part epoxy glue to the holes in her lower legs, making sure to clean up the cup part, because if I don't, then that's going to glue the foot and it won't be articulated. And then I'm adding the tops of the lollipops of the feet and just holding that. This glue takes about 5 minutes to set, 24 hours to cure fully, but 5 minutes to set, so just holding that to make sure that the feet work. Like, the feet are kind of the most important part of the project to me. I had the perfect gel polish to tie her outfit together, so she had a tiny gel manicure. I didn't show it, but I masked off the furry legs and then sprayed her body with Vallejo white. Her whole body had 2 coats of Mr. Super Clear to try and protect the paint job. Finally, I'm putting her together. I put her head in a plastic bag and then into boiling water to soften the vinyl. I put her dress on. The wrists are gathered and I made sure that they were tight around her wrists, so I had to put her hands on after. When I made the dress, I only sewed about 1 inch at the back at the bottom, and then it's open until the top where there's a hook and eye. This is so that her tail will be able to poke out and the ribbon will gather at the waist. The collar has a drawstring, so this means that the dress is a lot more flexible. If I want it around her shoulders, it can be. If I want it higher, it can be. I absolutely love how it turned out. The floofy collar is exactly what I wanted. I'm pulling that drawstring tight, and then I'm tying that in a bow at the back. I'm tying the ribbon in a bow at the back. I trimmed the neck peg, but I still couldn't get her head on, so I further trimmed the neck peg at the sides. This isn't something that I'd usually do, but it did help. I drilled a hole through the daffodil so that I could put a pin through it and then stab it into her head. And with that, she's done. What do you think? I love how she turned out. I honestly didn't think she would look half this good. She was an absolute pleasure to photograph as well. I find doll photography quite difficult, but I had a lot of fun with her. I did notice that from some angles she looks absolutely horrified though. Very expressive face. Don't forget to check out Of Crafts and Curios, stunning doll. I just love her whole channel. She's so talented and I love all of her ideas. Her aesthetic is just absolute chef's kiss. Don't forget to check the description box for links. There's the book, Creative Fabrica, Patreon, and all of my materials down there. Thanks as always to my wonderful patrons, with a special thanks to Camilla. You all really help me to make these videos possible, and I appreciate all of you. Like and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!